This is the second video in a two-part series talking about some of Windlass's more unfortunate attempts at reproducing museum original pieces. I highly recommend you go watch the first video because it has a lot more context. The link will be in the description below of this video, so go check it out first and then come back here as we talk about this monstrosity. So the funny thing about this sword is that I've actually looked for a reproduction of it before. And up until now, my only knowledge of a reproduction, besides some really cheap stainless steel ones to come from China, would be the one that Topeka made. And if you know anything about Topeka, well, they're really only making kind of visually decent weapons, but they usually don't handle very well. Their material and their tempering is not usually up to snuff. This is a rather heavy sword, so I'm going to hold it down until I am going to talk about it. Yeah, there are no real good reproductions of it, including this one. This is not a good reproduction of it. You see, the original is actually a piece that is from the Wallace collection. There's a picture right here of it. And that is a really interesting and unique looking claymore, is it not? Now, most people think this is probably like an 18th century sword that was made very much like a bearing sword, a ceremonial sword, never really meant to be used, but it's a really fascinating design. And the handle is some kind of bone. I don't know a lot about it. I think there's a lot of speculation about it as well. Well, I happened to be making my way out of town, and the direction I was going took me right by the Museum Replicas storefront. Museum Replicas is one of the primary storefronts or resellers, and they're pretty much just Windlass. And so it's Museum Replicas and Atlanta Cutlery. They have a storefront. I go there at least once a year for their warehouse sales. And I decided to just kind of stop by and see what all they might have and just look at swords in general, because even when it's just Windlass, it's fun to look at swords. And lo and behold, I saw this on the wall. This monstrosity. And, I mean, look at it. It caught my eye immediately because I was a little bit taken aback. I was very surprised to see that they had made a replica of this kind of bent horn style claymore. But something seemed really off at first. I couldn't quite place my finger on it because it had been a while since I looked at the picture. And then it dawned on me when I asked them if I could hold it and take a look at it. And that was just how uniquely wrong this crossguard is. You see, the one that is pictured here has 4 quillons. That is basically 2 entire crossguards, and it has quatrefoils at either end, and that's 4 quatrefoils. And it looks one particular way, and then this doesn't quite look like you'd expect. So what went wrong here? Well, before I get to what went wrong, let's actually talk about the fact that Windlass actually made a replica of this. You see, this isn't in any of their catalogs. I don't know if it was ever in any of their catalogs. What I was told by the person at the storefront is that they had been doing inventory of their warehouse and they came across some boxes buried in the recess, like some sort of Ark of the Covenant in a giant government warehouse. And when they opened it up, they found the component pieces disassembled of this reproduction. Now, it is actually a screw pommel here, but it looks like they had to just basically assemble it on site. And that's actually what he told me. They had, I believe it was 9 total. This was one of 9 that they had. And they put this one together and put it on the display. Because it's not a piece that they were selling in catalogs, or at least not anymore, and because it's not even something they have an inventory number on anymore, they decided to sell it at a very discount price. I actually picked this up for about $150, and it's only available at their storefront. And I would just assume that it's first come, first serve for anyone who's interested in trying to get a hold of this one. Now, the problem, of course, again, is that the crossguard design is all wrong. The rest of it actually looks fairly decent. The blade looks like you'd expect. They decided to go with wood instead of a bone or a horn or whatever was on the original. But for the most part, it looks good, except for this crossguard, because it's all sorts of wrong. If I put this edge on, you can actually see it's this kind of weird triangular pattern. It's not right at all. The original actually had a primary crossguard that went parallel to the blade and then perpendicular to the blade. So it would have looked, spot on cross there as well as there. But this one is not, and it's not even 4 quillons, it's just 3. And everything about this just goes against, like, why, if they're going to make a reproduction of this, would they get it so wrong? And also, how? How did they get this so wrong? Well, if you look at the pictures of this sword that are available online, first off, there aren't very many pictures of the piece that's in the Wallace collection. But secondly, the few pictures that are taken are of very specific angles that seem to be driven by how this sword in the Wallace collection is actually displayed. And that is that it's displayed in a case kind of sitting further back. And to get any good picture of it, you're only going to get one of a couple of angles. And my thought process, if you look at some of these pictures, is that it's very easy to see how someone could accidentally, well, not notice one of the quillins in the background, maybe even cut it out if they were doing some basic Photoshop kind of editing or just kind of simplifying of the image for the purposes of reproduction. What's even more so is that when you get to a certain angle, not only does it look like it only has 3 quillins, but it also looks like, well, you have 1 quillin going straight on and 2 going at odd angles. This is something of an optical illusion when you look at the picture. If you look at it just right, again, Photoshop to the rescue, I'm going to show you exactly what I'm thinking of here. And I think that's maybe exactly what happened. They took some pictures and measurements, and they didn't really note all the details as well they should, and the people just looked at the picture and reproduced what they saw in the picture. And so what they've ended up with is a terrible replica of the museum original, but a rather unique time slice in Windlass's own history of making swords to have made something that's, well, uniquely Windlass. So I had to pick this up, even though I would have looked for a replica and I would have liked one that was a little bit more accurate. I feel like it's awesome to get this one for quite a few reasons, none more so than it was a halfway decent price. And it is now a truly unique piece that I can add to my collection and point to and have a good story to tell. And more importantly, point people to the actual museum original of this kind of interesting claymore bearing sword. Now, there's some interesting things about this sword in general. It's a very wobbly sword. The blade is awfully thin for its overall size, so it actually, I think, it actually kind of bends under some of the weight. I wouldn't say it's the most well-made replica sword that is out there that Windlass has done. I certainly think they could have done a much better job, but man, is this a hilarious mistake in my opinion. An odd design choice, and it just goes to show that even when you have good intent to do a replica, you should really pay very close attention to the design of the original and make sure you get the details right, or otherwise you end up with this monstrosity. So that's it, guys. It's a very, very interesting story. I hope you enjoyed this small series talking about some of Windlass's major mistakes in reproducing museum originals. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, cheers and have a wonderful day.